Welcome to Brother Miller's Notes. Alma chapter 53 to 63 was one of my favorite series of chapters growing up. I loved the storyline in those chapters. Let's do a little bit of background before we get to these warriors. Verse 10 of chapter 53 says, "And now behold, I have somewhat to say concerning the people of Ammon, who in the beginning were Lamanites. But by Ammon and his brethren, or rather by the power and the word of God, they had been converted unto the Lord." I think that's really the focus here. You can see it in what they do as parents, as a people, as a community, that they are converted. And there's a unifying factor in their faith in God. And back to the verse. "And they had been brought down in the land of Zarahemla and had been ever since been protected by the Nephites." This is a people with a history of violence, a history of sin, and they wanted to throw it all away, put it all away. They wanted to just get rid of those lives. And you may remember one of the great symbolic things that they do is, it's like we have all these weapons of war and we want to get rid of them. We want to bury them deep so we can never get them again. So that's going back chapter 24, verses 16 and 17. "Now, my brethren, if our brethren seek to destroy us, behold, we will hide away our swords, even that we may bury them deep in the earth, that they might be bright as a testimony that they never used them at the last day. And if our brethren destroy us, behold, we shall go to our God, and we shall be saved. And now it came to pass that when the king had made an end of these sayings, and all the people were assembled together, they took their swords, and all the weapons which were used for the shedding of man's blood, and they did bury them deep in the earth." We're going to make a covenant, and we're going to do all these things to make sure we keep the covenant. I love that imagery of burying your sins deep as you make a covenant. So back to Alma 53, verse 13. Things are not going well for the Nephites. And they're getting the rear ends kicked a little bit. And it's a time of really, dangerous is probably the right word to say. Verse 13, "It came to pass that when they," now this is the people of Ammon, "saw the danger that's coming in on them and the Nephites are defending them, and the many afflictions and tribulations." Yeah, you got danger, afflictions, tribulations. These Nephites are putting up with doing a lot for this group of people, which the Nephites bore for them. They were moved with compassion and were desirous to take up arms in defense of their country. But behold, as they were about to take up the weapons of war, they were overpowered by the persuasions of Helaman the prophet and his brethren, for they were about to break the oath which they had made. They were about to break a covenant, and here we have Helaman and everybody else. No, you can't break your covenant. The covenant is more important. And verse 15, "And Helaman feared lest by doing so they should lose their souls. Therefore, all those who had entered into this covenant were compelled to behold their brethren wade through their afflictions in their dangerous circumstances at this time." Big but, verse 16, "It came to pass they had many sons who had not entered into a covenant, that they would not take their weapons of war to defend themselves against their enemies. Therefore they did assemble themselves together at this time, as many who were able to take up arms, and they called themselves Nephites." I just pause here. There is one phrase in this verse that just stands out to me. They did assemble themselves together. This wasn't the idea of the prophet. This wasn't the idea of their parents. This wasn't the idea of the church leaders. Here's a group of young men who decided by themselves, we need to get together and help out. And I thought, this type of a kid, how do you help your children be like that? Proactive, aware of things going on, and being able to say, okay, let's get together and counsel together. Well, from verse 16, let me just point out a couple things that this group of young men were doing that may give us clues on what helped them become this type of a young man, where they want to be aware of things, they are aware of things, and they want to help. So, going back to verse 10, "By the power and the word of God, their parents have been converted unto the Lord." I think there's so much power when a parent, and particularly both parents, are converted to the Lord, and it shows. And they stay converted. That changes the direction of a family. They buried their weapons of war deep, physically. It's everything in the all the decorations have gone down. The things that are coming into the home are not weapons of war. I think both physically, but also weapons of war that maybe we do with our words. They left their old lifestyle behind. This is in Alma 53 by moving to Zarahemla. They left old friends. They left family members behind. I have to move to be able to be in a place where I can be in a ward or a stake. And then verse 13, the parents were moved with compassion and desire. They were willing to do things. They had made and kept covenants in verses 14 and 15. I kind of summarize, your righteousness is an influence on others, especially your children. This group of people, the parents, the kids, were protected by the Nephites, their former enemies. And then just a big generality, the righteousness of your community influences others, including your children. Your righteousness as a part of that community influences other kids, other parents. President Russell M. Nelson, and I love this promise, especially as it relates to this story. Now, each member of the church, I say, keep on the covenant path. Your commitment to follow the Savior by making covenants with Him and then keeping those covenants will open the door to every spiritual blessing and privilege available to men, women, and children everywhere. You make your covenant, you keep them. The door is open to every spiritual blessing, every spiritual privilege available to men, women, and children everywhere. That doesn't mean that every spouse or every child will take it, but you do your part to make sure those blessings are available. And Elder Richard G. Scott commented on the parents, what the parents were doing, by saying, their humble, lifelong commitment to forsaking their sins did more to protect their families than anything they could have done on the battlefield. Their submission did not deprive them of blessings. It strengthened them and blessed future generations. Okay, we spent a lot of time on these kids, but maybe a little bit more on the parents and what the parents have been doing, a lifetime commitment. And then it comes to maybe, I don't want to say one act, but it's a series where these kids do and become what their parents have become. So you get 53:17, and they entered into a covenant. Well, the mom and dad have entered in covenant, so they're going to do the same thing. It's the same pattern. To fight for the liberty of the Nephites, yea, to protect the land unto the laying down of their lives, yea, even they covenanted that they would never give up their liberty, but that they would fight in all cases to protect the Nephites and themselves from bondage. So you got they did this covenant. Elder Christofferson, Deacard Christofferson, noted this. Divine covenants make strong Christians. I urge each of you to qualify for and receive all the priesthood ordinances you can, and then faithfully keep your promises you've made by covenant. In times of distress, let your covenants be paramount, and let your obedience be exact. Then you can ask in faith, nothing wavering, according to your need, and God will answer. He will sustain you as you work and watch. In His own time and way, He will stretch forth His hand and say unto you, here am I. And I make a side note in just is a part of this quote. I think I don't want to restate it simplistically. You make your covenants, you become a stronger Christian. It's going to help those around you in times of distress. Now, as a broader perspective, they're getting the physical warfare, they're getting attacked, the Nephites are. But there's also dissensions. There are people among the Nephites who are choosing to dissent from the society, dissent from the church, dissent from God. I think there's so many parallels to our day, but there is a source of strength as we make and keep our covenants with God. So my number 2 bullet, this is lessons for our youth and us too, okay? We strengthen our commitment by making a covenant, and we teach our kids. Let's talk about the next covenant. And then in that verse, when they do it, they did it in all cases. It wasn't just sometimes, it was in all cases. And verse 19, and now, behold, as they had hitherto been a disadvantage to the Nephites, they became now at this period of time of also a great support. For they took their weapons of war as they would that Helaman should be their leader. I've often wondered, you get these youth, they assemble together, they make a covenant to wherever they are in all cases, that they're going to be committed and help strengthen, and then they want, we want to have a leader. Now, for me, I would have said, okay, which of these colonels is really, really good at being a warrior and leading? Which one of these captains would really help us? But I wonder what made them choose the prophet to be their leader. I mean, they didn't choose Tiankum the awesome. It's Helaman. Maybe this reflects mom and dad's love for the prophet. They had respect, I'm sure, for Tiankum and the military leaders, but mom and dad loved the prophet, and they did too. They choose the prophet as their leader. And I think maybe that's part of today, encouraging our kids. Let's let the prophet be, maybe I won't say the word leader, the prophet, the influencer. I've got an Instagram account, and I'm following the prophet's account. For us older, we have Facebook. Hey, I'm following. My tweets I get from the church's website. Okay, they are our influences, our leaders today. Now, verse 22, it came to pass Helaman did march at the head of his 2,000 stripling warriors. And so this is the first time we get this adjective. Actually, if Sister Wells watches this, she'll tell me if I got that right. Adjective. Got to go back to my 9th grade English class. To the support of the people in the borders of the land on the south by the west sea. I'm focused on stripling. Stripling means youth. We go back to the Arnold Freeberg picture of these youth, and he draws them just with these massively overdeveloped upper bodies because he's trying to convey that their spirituality is just massive. It's solid. But I just picture youth. 2,000 youth. There's nothing about them physically where they are manly men. But I just think, as a generalize, you have this idea, youth of their day were fighting battles against whatever. Sometimes they're decoys, and so there's no real fighting. Sometimes they're fighting against the Lamanite army. But these youth, they fight battles against, and they have results. And I think, okay, so you could put it in like one sentence. 2,000 youth are fighting battles against the Lamanites, resulting in, well, none of them were killed. Or today, youth of today are fighting battles, in their high school, in their ward, in the silence of their souls, against, well, the wickedness of this world. And it results in their increased commitment to having faith in Jesus Christ, to keeping their covenants, to being strong. As Ephesians, I just love this from Paul, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And as a result for them, they, verse 21, did obey and observe to perform every word of command with exactness. We don't quote this verse quite as much in the church as we used to. Yea, and even according to their faith, it was done unto them. And I did remember the words which they had said unto me, that their mothers had taught them. I love that they obey and observe and perform every word of command with exactness. When the prophet, their leader, says something, I'm just going to do it. I love that. Now, they also have a relationship with the prophet. It's not just, all right, sir prophet. They call them phrases like father, and he's calling them my sons. You get it several times in chapter 56, verses 10, 17, 27, 30, 39, 44, 46. I have them all on the screen. Where that relationship just comes through with what they're calling each other. And you get this, they're just valiant. They're courageous. And I think because they have the Old Testament scriptures and you have the prophet there, I wonder how many times as they're getting ready for battle, one of the classic verses of the Old Testament is quoted. This is Deuteronomy 31:6. Be strong and of good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, he it is that doth go with thee, and he will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. They have true courage, because they're valiant in doing what's right. So that verse 53:20, they were true at all times whatsoever things they were entrusted. This type of young man is what we need today. And these are the type of parents we need for our young men today. Elder M. Russell Ballard said, what we need now is the greatest generation of missionaries in the history of the church. We need worthy, qualified, spiritually energized missionaries who, like Helaman's 2,000 stripling warriors, are exceedingly valiant for courage and also for strength and activity, and who are true at all times in whatsoever things they are entrusted. Now, verse 21, I'd add one more for this screen. Yea, they were men of truth and soberness. Now, that soberness, if you go back to kind of a Greek, an older translation, means soundness of mind. Okay, they were just, in their minds, they thought through things well. They had self-control. That's also part of sober. They were men of truth and soberness. They had been taught to keep the commandments of God and to walk uprightly before him. Uprightly means to walk complete or whole. Walk completely before him. No, only obedience on a Sunday and then on a Friday night, maybe not. Wholly, your whole heart, completely, unimpaired, with integrity. Now, in Alma 56, you get this letter, an epistle that Helaman sends to Moroni and says, hey, here's what's going on. This 56 to 58 letter, he writes during the war, and he's kind of like saying in 56, here's the plan. Helaman is going to take his 2,000 stripling warriors, and they're going to be a decoy. They're going to go out because the Lamanites are in their stronghold, and we got to lure them away. And so you get this Helaman and the 2,000, they're going to come up to where the city are, and then I just think they're going to feign, oh no, here's the big army. And they're going to, yeah, I got to run away. And they run away. And then the big army's like, oh, we got these 2,000. Let's go take them out. And so you get this chase. And the idea is they're going to be chasing, and the 2,000, they're just going beelining it, right? Out of there. And the Lamanite army are chasing after them. But then you get Antipas's army that's going to come around them and flank them and then come up behind them and then, start attacking, and then their 2,000 are going to be safe. Well, that's not what happens. And the Lamanite army chases them, and all of a sudden they realize Antipas's army is behind them. Uh-oh, we're in trouble. And like, okay, here's our new plan. We'll take out the 2,000. And then we'll turn around and take care of Antipas's army because we're not going to fight on two fronts. So they just keep chasing. And Antipas realizes this. And his men have to go even faster for a longer period of time. They expend so much energy because they have to save the 2,000 young warriors. And it's at cost, and they know it. So by the time they catch up to this Lamanite army, they are tired. And then you get this time where the 2,000 stop and realize we're not being chased anymore. And they're like, hey, Antipas's army's overtaken them. And there's a real danger Antipas's army is going to lose and get wiped out. And so now they have this conversation. We're tired and we're young. And then you get one of these classic verses of Alma 56, 47, 48. Now they had never fought, yet they did not fear death. They had been taught by their mothers that if they would not doubt, God would deliver them. And they rehearsed unto me, saying the words of their mothers, saying, we do not doubt, our mothers knew it. Sometimes we forget that these young men had been talking about what their moms have been teaching for chapters now. They keep saying, here's what my mom taught. We know what my mom taught. We know she knows it. They knew of their parents' faith and commitment. And so in verse 47, they did not think more upon their fathers than they did upon their own lives. I'm thinking, here's a group of teenagers, a time when a lot of times it's more, hey, I'm turning from parents to maybe more myself, my selfish nature. But they think more upon their family, their parents, than they do on their own lives. They just, a lot what they've been taught so well. Verse 48, and they rehearsed unto me the words of their mothers, saying, we do not doubt our mothers knew it. And now skipping over a chapter, I want to read a related verse, verse 26. And now their preservation was astonished. This is after the war, okay? Or battle. To our whole army, that they should be spared. There was 1,000 of our brethren who were slain. And we do justly ascribe it to the miraculous power of God, because of their exceeding faith in what they had been taught to believe, that there was a just God, who did not doubt that they would preserve by his marvelous power. Their faith in chapter 56:48, we do not doubt our moms knew it. I do note it's interesting they didn't add I know, but it's we don't doubt our moms knew it. There's power with their moms, and maybe some of them don't have that quite same conversion themselves. But in the end, after the battle, we'll get the battle in a minute, they ascribe it to their exceeding faith in what they had been taught to believe. They do have faith in what was taught. And I love. So another kind of lesson for our youth, and for us too, is to have exceeding faith in what we've been taught by, like a prophet, Helaman, taught with association with our covenants, the gospel of Jesus Christ. I love this quote from President Boyd K. Packer. It's one of my favorite he ever said. The shield of faith is not produced in a factory, but at home. It's not a defense that's mass produced, but individualized and customized and fortified in the home. I think of all the pictures that I'll show you today, this is probably my favorite, because this happens after the battle. Antipas's armies come up on them, they're fighting, the 2,000 Stripling warriors come back, and in all respect, you would think that some of these would go down. And some have passed out because of loss of blood. But what amazes me in this picture is it shows it the way I think it really is. You look at every one of these warriors, these youngsters, and they all have a bandage. They're all bleeding. And that's kind of what the verse says. So verses 25 and 26, came to pass that there were 200 out of my 2,060, we got 60 more, right, who had fainted because of loss of blood. Nevertheless, according to the goodness of God, and to our great astonishment, and also the joy of our whole army, there was not one soul of them who did perish. Yea, neither was there one soul among them who had not received many wounds. None of them died. But they all had not just one wound, a couple wounds, many wounds. They have a lot of faith, but they get wounded. Verse 26, now their preservation was astonishing to our whole army. Yea, that they should be spared while it was just 1,000 of our brethren who were slain. And we do justly ascribe to the miraculous power of God, because of their exceeding faith in that which they had been taught to believe, that there was a just God. And whosoever did not doubt that they should be preserved by his marvelous power. When we have youth like these 2,060 stripling warriors who have this type of faith, there cannot be an expectation that they won't receive wounds. Deep wounds. Maybe wounds enough that cause them, like them, to faint. That seems to be our today's society. I love the way Elder Meredith said it. In the face of affliction or trials, you may be like me and hope that the rescue will be immediate. When we must wait, rest assured that the Savior is always watching, ensuring that we will not have to endure more than we can bear. To those who are waiting, perhaps still in the midst of suffering, do not lose hope. Rescue always comes to the faithful, whether during mortality or in the eternities. So I put in, hey, lessons for our youth today. They receive many wounds, and I I wish they didn't, but that happens. But they put their trust in God continually. And in verse 40, they stand fast. Okay, this is after the battle. And some of them could have said, well, I thought I was promised I wouldn't get hurt. But yeah, okay, I did. But they stand fast in the liberty wherein God had made them free. They continued, even after the battle, as they're moving on, to be strict to remember the Lord their God from day to day. And also in verse 40, they kept God's statutes and his judgments and his commandments continually. And their faith, in verse 40, was strong in the prophecies. It wasn't just a one-time thing. Oh, we got delivered, now we can kind of relax. But it's, hey, we got delivered, and now it's even more of a commitment to stay on the covenant path. Sometimes people want to just pick and choose. Maybe their time is over, or maybe they're in time of trial, and they're like, I'm strong, and I want to keep the commandments, most of them, and they pick and choose. That's not these. They're doing all of them. This picking and choosing process, President Nelson has called like a cafeteria approach. He said it this way: you will encounter people who pick which commandments they will keep and ignore the others they choose to break. I call this the cafeteria approach to obedience. This practice of picking and choosing will not work. It will lead to misery. To prepare to meet God, one must keep all of his commandments. Obedience to the commandments of God will provide physical and spiritual protection. Elder Renlund added, our Heavenly Father's goal in parenting is not to have his children to do what is right. It is have his children choose to do what is right and ultimately become like him. If he simply wanted us to be obedient, he would use immediate rewards and punishments to influence our behaviors. But God is not interested in his children just becoming trained and obedient pets. God established a plan whereby we can become heirs in his kingdom, a covenant path that leads us to become like him, have the kind of life he has, and live forever as families in his presence. Personal choice was and is vital to this plan, which we learned about in our premortal existence. Now you get in chapter 58, this, few verses, Helaman's 2,060, this little group he calls them, they're fighting, he describes as an innumerable army. And I think it's kind of like the fight of today of our youth. They fight against such innumerable influences, voices, that are trying to get them to go any other way but on the covenant path. And I just think back, just a parallel to 1 Nephi 14, where the number of the church are small versus Satan's forces is very, very large. And I just think, okay, well, what do you do? Well, in these verses, here's what they do when they're outnumbered. They start off, verse 10, they pour out their whole soul in prayer to God. And then you get next verse 11, and yea, it came to pass, the Lord our God did visit us with assurances, that he would deliver us, yea, inasmuch as he did speak peace to our souls, and did grant us great faith, and did cause us that we should hope for our deliverance in him. I love the context around that verse. Innumerable army, it's really tough. It doesn't seem like we're going to have it out, but we received assurance and peace and hope of deliverance. It's a major theme of the Book of Mormon, isn't it? Assurance that the prophecies are true. Hope that there will be an opportunity for it to be delivered. God's not going to take the battle out of our lives, but he will visit us with assurances. Maybe the battle's with health, or maybe it's with emotional challenges. Maybe it's with the challenges of a next-door neighbor. Not me, honestly. I got great neighbors. Okay? But sometimes we have got something. But they can give you hope for deliverance. Peace to your soul. With this assurance, you have that peace, faith, and hope. And God gives you courage and a fixed determination, verse 11, to conquer and maintain. I love that. To conquer and maintain. And in verse 13, that little group are enabled to fight with all of your might. You can do the best you can. Now, just in summary, in the fight against the evils of our day, we should pour out our soul to God. And his promise is we will get those nudges, those assurances. Not clarity, but assurances that have peace, of faith and hope that will enable us to have that courage, have a fixed determination to keep on the covenant path. And in the end, you'll be victorious. After learning that Helaman's army men, they lacked supplies to defend the Nephites from a larger army, we get Captain Moroni. He sends this letter to Pehoran. And Pehoran's a Nephite chief judge. And you probably know this is the storyline. Moroni asks Pehoran, hey, send us reinforcements. You got to send them to Helaman's army. No help comes. And Helaman's army continues to suffer. And now there's another city, Nephihah, which the Lamanites come on. And if they would have gotten some little bit of strengthening, they probably could have defended, been okay, but it gets taken away. And Helaman's like, we spend so much more energy to reconquer a city. If you've just given us a little bit. And it's like, oh, he's just ticked off. And when you're mad, it's probably not the best time to write a letter, but he's mad, and that's when he writes a letter to Pehoran. Moroni's patience is just gone. And as it turns out, this letter that he maybe writes a little rashly, he's right in everything he says but one. He accuses the wrong man of the problem his armies and the people are suffering. Hey, here's just a taste of that letter. Chapter 60, verse 5. But behold, great has been the slaughter among our people. Yea, thousands have fallen by the sword. Well, it might have otherwise been if ye had rendered unto our army sufficient strength and succor for them. Yea, great has been your neglect towards us. Now behold, we desire the cause of this exceeding great neglect. Yea, we desire to know the cause of your thoughtless state. Can you think to sit upon your throne in a state of thoughtless stupor, while your enemies are spreading the work of death around you? Yea, while they are murdering thousands of your brethren? Yea, even they who have looked up to you for protection. Yea, have placed you in a situation ye might have succored them. Yea, ye might have sent armies to them, to strengthen them, and save thousands of them by falling by the sword. But behold, this is not all. You've withheld your provisions from them, insomuch they have fought and bled out their lives, because of their great desires, which they have done for the welfare of this people. Yea, and this they have done when they are about to perish with hunger, because of your exceeding great neglect towards them. Hey, Captain Moroni hits the bullseye. Every place, everything is true, but he's accusing Pehoran, and Pehoran's not the problem. Pehoran could have wrote a letter back in anger and said, mind your own business. I'm not the problem here. If you had any vision at all, you would see, right? But he doesn't. He takes a different approach. He says, yeah, you're right, but you got the wrong guy. Elder Maxwell stated it so beautifully, as Elder Maxwell very, very often did. Pehoran was not a resentful rejoinder, lamenting the fact that Moroni was foolish about the facts. Pehoran did not engage in sarcasm or bitterness by lamenting the things that were at least as rough for him as they were for Moroni and the army. He could have been sarcastic, saying he no longer had any throne to sit on, in a state of thoughtless stupor. He could have justifiably boiled over at the accusation of his being a traitor, telling Moroni to do his job as chief captain, and that Pehoran would do his job as governor. Instead, this exchange permitted these two leaders to rally themselves and their forces to retake the city. Moroni, when he received Pehoran's reply, indicated that his heart did take courage, and that he rejoiced because of the faithfulness of Pehoran. What did Pehoran say that would make Moroni rejoice? 61 verse 9, one of the best verses in the Book of Mormon. If you've ever been accused of something wrong, Or someone says something to you about you that you think, wow. Verse 9, and now, in your epistle, you have censured me, but it mattereth not. I'm not angry, but do rejoice in the greatness of your heart. I, Pehoran, do not seek for power, save only to retain my judgment seat, that I may preserve the rights and liberty of my people. My soul standeth fast in that liberty, in the which God hath made us free. In short, I'm reading between the lines where he says, hey, I'm choosing not to get mad at this. You got the wrong guy. But I love that you're passionate about this. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your passion. And he's choosing not to be offended. He could have been so offended. Being offended is a choice. Elder David R. Bednar, a few years ago, said this: one of the greatest indicators of spiritual maturity is revealed in how we respond to the weaknesses, inexperience, and potentially offensive actions of others. Ultimately, it is impossible for another person to offend you or to offend me. Indeed, believing that another person offended us is fundamentally false. To be offended is a choice we make. Please remember that you and I are agents endowed with moral agency, and we can choose not to be offended. Through the strengthening power of the atonement of Jesus Christ, you and I can be blessed to avoid and triumph over offense. The capacity to conquer offense may seem beyond our reach. The very nature of the Redeemer's atonement and the purpose of the restored church are intended to help us receive precisely this kind of spiritual strength. I also love the way simply Elder Neil L. Anderson put it. I promise you, as you choose not to be offended, you will feel Christ's love and approval, but will know that you are becoming more like him. I love Pehoran's example of choosing not to be offended, but in choosing to look at where Chief Captain Moroni was right. Hey, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you maybe got a little bit of it wrong, but I just love you for saying something, even though it's 98% correct, and the 2% is where you're targeting me. Now, sometimes as I do this, I'll add in one quote from Elder Holland that I think is just in a classroom setting. Sometimes people are taking things, they're being abused, and they kind of go, well, maybe I should just choose to continue in this. And the question is sometimes asked, should I allow someone to continue to hurt me in order to forgive them and not take offense? Elder Holland said this profound statement clearly and maybe emphatically. It is, however, important for some of you living in real anguish to note what Christ did not say. He did not say you are not allowed to feel true pain or real sorrow from the shattering experiences you've had at the hand of another. Nor did he say, in order to forgive fully, you have to re-enter a toxic relationship or return to an abusive, destructive circumstance. Okay, as a summary here, I love the story. I've always loved the story of the stripling warriors, whether you call them the 2000 or the 2060. We need young women and young men like that. We need parents who have entered into covenants and who have a lifelong commitment to staying and keeping on the covenant path. That enables the youth of today to become who they really have been foreordained to be. President Ezra Taft Benson testified, "You have been born at this time for a sacred and glorious purpose. It is not by chance that you've been reserved to come to this earth in this last dispensation of the fullness of times. Your birth at this particular time was foreordained in the eternities. You are to be the royal army of the Lord in the last days. In the spiritual battles you are waging, I see you as today's sons of Helaman. Remember well the Book of Mormon accounts of Helaman's 2,000 stripling warriors." And I use this quote probably for personal reasons. This was said as I was a senior in high school. I felt it applied to me. But I've also used it in classes today because it is this last dispensation in the fullness of times. I think this quote applies to my generation as well as my kids, and I think to my grandkids. Remember well, he said, the account of Heman's 2,000 stripling warriors. Not everything goes right among those who have covenanted. We do receive many wounds. Maybe sometimes we are accused wrongly. But there are lessons for our youth and lessons for us from these parents and from these warriors. I just am so impressed with their families. Thanks so much for spending some time with me. I love the thoughts and suggestions that you write on my YouTube cat channel. Thanks for watching. I'm hoping that it continues to be a blessing for you in your life. And all the quotes I have just for your convenience, because I like it when I can get a quote and go copy and paste. You can't do that from video. That's why I put them up there on brothermiller.org. So if you want any of the quotes, you can just go there and go down to this week's lesson or past lessons. And then if you're like me, I copy those quotes with the reference and then put them in my scriptures for future use. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Keep smiling. Have a great day.